And moving on to our fourth session this afternoon, this will take us to the Philippine experience where regulatory sandboxes are already being applied. Right? To share these experiences, we are joined by Mr. Melchor T. Plabasan. Director Plabasan is the Department Head of Technology Risk and Innovation Supervision at the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. He has led major regulatory reforms that enabled innovation such as e-wallets, online banking, and digital banks, making financial services more accessible to Filipinos. Let us all welcome Director Melchor T. Plabasan.
So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Philippines. First and foremost, I'd like to thank DAP, of course, and Apple for this opportunity to, of course, share the BSP's insights on how we leverage regulatory sandbox to foster innovation in the financial services sector. Now, it's great to be part of this meaningful initiative, the gathering of 91 plus participants from all over Asia to discuss how technology, how digital transformation can improve the productivity of our work, of our organization. Okay. So before diving into the details of our regulatory sandbox framework, I would just like to share with you some guiding principles, high-level principles when it comes to our mindset in adapting in fostering innovation in the financial services industry. Of course, we are technology agnostic. We do not prescribe the specific technology platforms that will be utilized by entities that we supervise or those that are not yet supervised but will apply to us for regulatory sandbox. So we are agnostic to that. And we try to be as progressive as we can, which means that we try to evolve with technological advancement, with changes in the business models, with new concepts and new ideas, and of course, adaptive as well. It has to be a dynamic framework wherein it's also risk-based. When you say risk-based, it means that the risk management controls that must be observed should be commensurate to the complexity of operations, complexity of products and services of the entities applying for regulatory sandbox. Now, just a quick overview of the regulatory sandbox that was adopted by the Philippines, by the BSP. Actually, it's not only the BSP that has so far adopted regulatory sandbox. Other financial regulators in the Philippines have also been adopting their own regulatory sandbox. In fact, Insurance Commission has its own regulatory. I don't know if there's someone from Insurance Commission. Our Securities and Exchange Commission also has its own regulatory sandbox framework. So there's also an opportunity for us, different financial regulators in the Philippines, to share ideas, to align our approaches when it comes to innovation. So when we speak of sandbox, by the way, I would just like to share that Sandbox has become popular, I think, during the last 5 years. But essentially, this concept we have been adapting since the late 1990s and early 2000s. If you're familiar with mobile wallet, I think a lot of research, a lot of material suggests that the first mobile wallet in the world are those from the Philippines, which is GCash and Maya. So those are the product of our sandbox. But back then, it's not yet called sandbox. To us, it's what we call test and learn approach. So that test and learn approach has evolved until we formalize the adoption of a structured approach, which is now called the regulatory sandbox. But a lot of regulators have already been observing test and learn approaches since 10 or 20 years ago. Again, the potential applicants would be existing supervised entities, other vendors, other service providers can also apply, and other registered institutions. Because the idea of sandbox is a particular product or concept or service is not yet covered by any regulation. So what can the regulator do is, of course, to observe it in a controlled environment. And then if there is a need, let's say in terms of, depending on the approach or depending on the direction, if there's a need to make the regulation more flexible, more adaptive, then that's what the regulator would adopt. But essentially, yeah, it's not yet covered by any existing regulation. So I'll share some of the examples recently. Some of the examples that were successfully exited our regulatory sandbox and were actually mainstreamed to the actual production environment. Now, there is also what we call eligibility criteria. So if you are an applicant, you need to demonstrate to us that you have a strong infrastructure, that strong risk management system, essentially. But all of these are in the circular. You should be able to present to us what metrics will be used for you to determine if let's say, if the sandbox can be considered a success or failure. And of course, there's also the exit mechanism or the exit strategy. When we say exit strategy, it can mean two things. Exit because you failed the sandbox. It means that you were not able to meet the objective of the sandbox. Or exit means that you are now going to mainstream the product or service and you will go through the regular licensing process of the regulator. So that's what exit means in Sandbox. No, I would just like, because Sandbox is some sort of vague concept, but just to give you an idea, the difference between innovation sandbox and regulatory sandbox. Essentially, innovation sandbox is a test environment being observed within the organization. Like in our case, while we run our own regulatory sandbox, but internally in BSP, we also have this creative, we call that creative studio. It's essentially a test environment where we allow our people to test new ideas, new solutions. A lot of the solutions that we are testing right now are Gen AI solutions that can potentially revolutionize certain manual processes in the organization. So as compared to sandbox, regulatory sandbox, on the other hand, is something that is controlled but in a live environment. That means that the product can interface with actual customers, or the service can interface with actual customers. Again, it's essentially innovation sandbox is essentially internal. Regulatory sandbox, there is an interface between the players and the regulator, so it's external. The main focus really of innovation sandbox is development, improvement in products, services, or processes. But while the regulators recognize that it's also one of the objectives of regulatory sandbox, but the more important objective really is for the regulator to check whether there is a need to change certain policies, because it's given, most of the policies are outdated, etc. That's why there is a need to be dynamic and to update certain policies to accommodate innovation, at least in the financial services. Again, in terms of scope, it's narrow, and regulatory sandbox is broad because it may entail products and services. It may entail internal processes which can transform the operations of a supervised entity. Now, just a quick overview of the process. So there is a circular describing the detailed process. So it will go through the application. So in the application, you will submit all the documentation, so infrastructure, the testings done, etc. We will also, if needed, we will go through what we call systems walkthrough. So there will be a systems walkthrough wherein we would actually check how the products will be used by the customers themselves when the product is launched in a controlled environment. And then it will go through evaluation. The turnaround time for all of these processes are also indicated in the circular. And then the testing, which normally happens between 3 months to 12 months, 12 maximum, but in certain instances, subject to justification, some entities may also apply for extension. And then, as I mentioned earlier, exit, which means that if it is a failure, then you need to exit, carry out some remaining processes, like if there is a need to return the remaining balance of clients, etc., or exit because you will go through the regular licensing process, and because it has been tested already, and you are now ready to mainstream the product or service. Now, just a quick overview of the governance process internally as to how we run Sandbox. So we have created two teams within the BSP. It's the Sandbox Oversight Team and Regulatory Sandbox Tribe. So Sandbox Oversight Team essentially is composed of senior management level officials of the BSP. It serves as the central point of contact for our applications. So all the applications will be received by this team. There will be meetings, there will be discussions on how the applications will be processed. And once the next steps are determined, it's now time to go to refer that to the Regulatory Sandbox Tribe, which is a specialized team. So it's composed of multidisciplinary group of people coming from different orientations, because a certain application, of course, aside from technology, there may be a need for AML, anti-money laundering people. There may be a need for, let's say, capital market, or there may be a need for, let's say, payment specialists. So the Sandbox Oversight Team essentially provides suggestions as to the composition of the specialized regulatory sandbox tribe that will run the sandbox of a particular product or service. Now, in the BSP, there are actually three ways by which players, existing or new players, can participate in the sandbox. First is the regular sandbox. So there is a new product, service, solution that is not yet covered by any regulation, so you can apply to us. Sandbox Lite, it means that a particular service or solution has already been proven effective in other supervised entities, but you want to, let's say, a small rural bank wants to try something that is already being offered, let's say, by GCash or by other big banks. So it can apply for a Sandbox Lite. So it means that that particular institution wants to test first that particular solution within a controlled environment and with the support of the regulator before actually mainstreaming them and offering them to a wider client base. And of course, when we say thematic cohort, essentially it's a sandbox that is primarily led by the regulator. Let's say in our case, we would like to, let's say, further develop capital markets. So we have created, or we have worked with the industry to come up with a sandbox on open finance. Essentially how to democratize access to certain investment products and services. So it's primarily driven by the regulator, and the regulator normally talks to the different players who may be interested or who may have the capability or who may be ready to join that thematic cohort. Now, I just a quick overview of the sandboxes that we have already received, probably, some of whom were actually returned. So only a few were actually tested in a sandbox environment. So this just gives you a number of the different services that were that were received by the BSP. So we have two on loan management. There are a lot of applications related to electronic money, but almost all of them were subsequently returned because essentially the offering is already covered by existing rules on e-money. So there's no need to go through the sandbox environment. This is one very impactful sandbox. It's a sandbox on gold trading. So essentially a supervised entity wants to be engaged in gold trading and use blockchain, distributed ledger. So to facilitate trading of gold. So they will serve as the small scale miners. If you're familiar with the Philippines, it's an archipelago. Composed of several or thousands of islands, and then there are small scale miners in the far flung areas, and it would be very difficult. And there are also limited gold buying stations in the Philippines. So what this entity did is, since it has a lot of physical touch points, so it served as it's like the middleman between the BSP and the small scale miners. And so far, I think millions worth of gold has already been sold to us using the blockchain solution of that particular regulated entity who serve as the middleman between the BSP and the small-scale miners. So there are also applications about staking, stable coins, and other payment solutions. For payment solutions and again for e-money, all of those were returned. Most of them were returned because they are already covered by existing rules and regulations. One also impactful sandbox that we recently concluded is on the use of stable coins, because particularly when it comes to remittance, how we can use stable coins to improve the efficiency and even the price, the cost of remittance. And it was proven that we can actually use stable coins. Filipinos, overseas Filipino workers in particular can send their remittance near real time, actually. In a few seconds, it can be received by their beneficiaries in the Philippines. And I think the cost is less than 1/10 of the usual cost. So we are now finalizing how this particular solution can be mainstreamed by the proponent. Now, I just would like to share with you some of I don't want to give the organizers, problem when it comes to, so that I'll try to finish this before 3 p.m. So some of the key challenges and lessons learned from the regulatory sandbox activities that we have carried out in the past several months. Of course, the first one is complexities of innovation. While you think that innovation provides a lot of benefits, but sometimes innovative technologies can actually result in probably legal ambiguities, because again, some of the laws and regulations were crafted 10 or 20 years ago when these types of solutions or products and services were not yet present during that time. So it may also expose us to unfamiliar business models, right? So unfamiliar or new arrangement. But the more important thing, of course, is in our case, we handled it by having a flexible framework. I mentioned about adaptive and dynamic. So we make sure that the framework that we are adapting is adaptive and dynamic. It may also introduce novel risks, not only novel risks, but probably new dimensions to traditional risk, essentially. But in our case, we were very clear in the regulation that while we may give certain concessions on certain aspect of the operations, but all the applicants know that we have several, 3 to 4 non-negotiable. So when we say non-negotiable, there are risks related to cybersecurity, consumer protection, anti-money laundering, which should be observed by the players themselves. The risk management solutions governing cybersecurity, consumer protection, and anti-money laundering should be comprehensively, completely observed by the players themselves. And resources and capability gaps, I'm pretty sure you are also faced with this problem given the innovation. So it also entails a lot of, it needs a lot of, hiring technical people, investing in technology. In our case later on, I think in the day two of this particular program, we will share how we use, how we embark in our own sandbox using Gen AI, and then how, all the inputs and all the ideas from the Gen AI sandbox that we carried out were used in coming up with regulations that will govern the responsible use of AI in the financial services industry. And of course, interconnectedness of players, interconnectedness of the regulators themselves. I'm pretty sure this may not be a concern, let's say, for the likes of Singapore, wherein there is only one, let's say for the financial services, there's only one regulator, which is Monetary Authority of Singapore. But in the Philippines and in other jurisdictions, let's say in Indonesia, there are different regulators. Let's say in our case, we have the SEC, we have the BSP, and then we have the Insurance Commission. So that will also need, there is also a need to probably coordinate with other regulators to ensure that in terms of the approaches are aligned, and there's also an opportunity to learn from the experiences of the other regulators. Now, additional insights from the sandbox that we recently carried out. Of course, regulatory sandbox is not a one-way process. So it's not like the players will actually learn or will navigate the regulatory landscape. It's also us, the regulators, learning about new processes, new concepts, new ideas, and in the process, of course, determine how we can make the regulation more adaptive to this innovative technology or innovative idea. So it's not a one-way thing. At this point, while we consider that we have, I can say, early successes when it comes to operationalizing our sandbox, since it started in 2022, but I can say that it's too early to draw conclusions right now in terms of, let's say, what would be the impact in the long run? What would be the impact of these initiatives that we recently approved? So it's still too early to tell, but we can actually already gauge some early successes or some key performance indicators that we use to measure the success of our initiatives. And of course, I mentioned earlier about the need to collaborate with other regulators. The good thing in the Philippines, at least, is we have what we call a financial sector forum, where the different regulators, it's a platform where the different regulators meet on a regular basis. So there's an opportunity for us to discuss innovations in the financial sector. And to end my presentation, I would just like to highlight that to some of you, in your jurisdiction, you may also have a regulatory sandbox framework, and we can say it actually provides a safe and structured space for testing innovative ideas, innovative products, innovative solutions in the financial services. So by actually enabling discovery, innovation, collaboration, it actually helps when it comes to, let's say, driving business process improvement, driving breakthroughs, which can actually lead to inclusive growth, probably inclusive progress, and market resilience as well. That ends my presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Director Plabasan, for sharing to us how the Philippines is using sandboxes to encourage innovation. Again, a warm round of applause, please.